Hello and welcome to the Wyland webinars, Make Better Decisions Faster, creating a culture of data that accelerates revenue growth. Thank you all for being here today as we share Steele's experience with data and how it positively has impacted their numerous areas of their business. I'd like to introduce our illustrious guests for today's discussion. Tom Scott is the head of information technology at Steele Inc. and is responsible for all U.S. activities related to business applications and technical infrastructure. Josh Cox is head of analytics at Tricisions, provider of consulting resources, applications, and services to facilitate analysis-based marketing decisions. And I'm Jeff Leibrock, Division Vice President, Direct to Consumer Retail at Wyland. I'll be your host and MC today. Before we get started, of course, we have a few housekeeping items to cover. This webinar is being recorded, which I detest, but here we go. And you should all receive a link to that recording shortly after we wrap up today. We'll be using the chat function to take audience questions today. We will be monitoring your comments and passing your questions on to the panel. If we aren't able to answer your question in today's session, someone will reach out to you to personally ensure you get the information you need. If you have any problems seeing or hearing the presenters, we suggest refreshing your browser. That may kick you out of the session, but you should be able to rejoin immediately. Finally, we have a short 1 or 2 minute survey at the end of the event. We appreciate your time in providing feedback on your experience today. All right, with all that out of the way, let's get started with our first question, and that goes to Tom. Can you tell us a little bit about what was happening at Steele when you first considered data as a solution, and what led you to partner with Wyland and work with customer data services?
Yeah, sure. Well, back in 2019, we were approaching the end of what was a 5-year contract with a third-party provider of some customer-based analytics. There were a few key functions in that service. We could see what our registration trends were, market trend penetration, and there was one key feature that allowed us to, or the intention was to allow us to identify the best areas to put new dealers. Steele, we don't sell through big box stores, Home Depot, Lowe's. We sell through independent dealers. We have about 10,000. We don't own them. They're all independently owned. Some are, parts of bigger companies like Ace. And so we don't have point of sale data, and the best we have is registration data. People buy our products and the dealers typically register them, and so we had that kind of data, and this third-party provider was using that to model, or at least attempt to model, where the best parts of the country were for these independent dealers for when we want to open up new ones. So as we were looking at whether we would renew that or not, we looked at the usage. The usage was not high. A lot of the feedback was, we don't trust the data. We don't believe what they're doing. It appeared to me from my former life experience that the cost was high, and I thought we could do a better job of it in-house. So we launched a project to evaluate that and to look at potential solutions. And probably the first thing I did as we broached that was to call my good friend Scott Carl, who's the founder of Tricision, because I had worked with him previously for about 25 years here and there. I think at least 3 different companies, mostly direct-to-consumer companies. And it's not really, Scott says, look, it's really not our bread and butter. What we really do is come up with models. These guys do really sophisticated modeling to especially enable targeted marketing, and they grew up in the catalog business, and that's where people really live and die by their customer data and modeling it to a degree where you can know who you should send a catalog to and how much inventory you should buy based on what response you could you'd expect. It's kind of the heart of that kind of business, and then it's it's morphed into e-commerce, but catalog is where, from my experience, it's really been most valuable. So Scott says, it's not really what we do, but we could work with you to develop a custom model to help identify these locations. So he hooked us up with Josh, and Josh is the guy we work with day to day. And one of Josh's first observations was, you just don't have that much data of your own that's going to allow this. You need external data. And so we looked at different providers, but got it down to a short list of a couple, of which Weiland is one. And deciding between the other one and Weiland, we were looking at factors like cost. Weiland was a little less expensive, but it was fairly close to a jump ball. The match rate, one of the first things we did is run our customer database up against Weiland. I think at that point it was like a 250 million customer master database. It's probably higher now. And we had a 92% match rate. So 92% of our customers were on Weiland's database. So, and it was, it was in the neighborhood with the other provider. I think it was actually a little bit lower. But both were about close enough to be a jump ball that we didn't want to decide it just on that. And Josh said to us, look, our experience is this. Since this is kind of a one-off type of model, you're going to need somebody that is going to be really flexible with you. And between the companies who are looking at this, Weiland is going to be the most flexible. They're going to work with us and help develop this custom thing. So Weiland got the nod, and that's how we ended up using their data in partnership with Tricision. And Tricision and Weiland have worked very closely together on this. Both have been flexible and both have been great partners. So we ended up ending the contract with the other company and rewriting this application and using the Weiland data as the primary data source, especially for this we call it this market opportunity model. And I can go into a little more on what that is, but I'll pause and see if our moderator wants me to keep going, or you want to ask.
Yeah, well, or maybe Josh wants to jump in.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll just kick it off with from a data perspective. It was really great working with Weiland. Tom had mentioned just the flexibility and how important that was to us. Is we were just taking data that they already have that we already use in other ways. And the coolest part about this whole project is that we just transformed that data and aggregated it in new and kind of different ways to kind of answer this question that we were after. And I think the big thing that Tom hasn't probably touched on yet, but will later, is that Steel is very kind of brand centric whenever they think about their organization and their business. And Tom has really led the charge on, all right, we're thinking about moving into the consumer space a little bit, and how do we become a little more customer centric? And so we were able to bring data in that helped the organization really start to think about the customer first. And so again, the building block to all this data is just the individual consumer level data that we're rolling up to different levels, we're transforming to different levels, and we're able to answer, this really cool question. And so this was just the first project of many, hopefully, as we kind of transition on the customer side.
So both Tom and Josh mentioned, I'm sorry, Tom, you mentioned that you're using it to isolate. Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe I'll just jump off on what Jeff said and give a little more color on this since he introduced the data aspect. One of the first things we did on evaluating the data is I think we started with, I don't know how many we started with. You guys have 2,500, 3,000, maybe more elements in your catalog. So which ones do you use? And Josh helped us come down to a relatively short list, but I think it was still like 1,000 or 1,500. And you guys, to working together, we whittled it down to what we thought might be basically predictive of a Steel customer, of someone's propensity to buy Steel products. And at the end of that refinement process, we ended up with about 135 key data elements, the nature of which are customer interests, their demographics, propensity to buy different things like recreational vehicles, power tools, etc., buying patterns and habits. And so that's the nature of the data that we were using. And then Josh, in going through applying all their advanced statistics to it, I think they used 15 or so different methods to do all this, identified, you know what, there's about 20 that are the best ones that are really predictive. So they built this model, and then we built an application to face it to our users. The primary user are our territory managers. They're people out in the field who are the ones in the area deciding, okay, where should we try and put a new dealer? And so it had to be something they could understand and a nice visual. But when we put it out there, and they were a little skeptical because the prior one they just didn't think was accurate, and our initial feedback was, wow, this maps with what I think our good areas are. And so there was already a high confidence level. So we faced that, and then we said, we have this other data, which is great data. So we put that all out on an analytics platform, which now it's been evolving and sits on a website. So anyone across the company can use this data for whatever purpose. They can, filter by any of these variables. We want to look at our customers, and we want to find all the people who are horse and ranch people, because we're going to put something in, horse and cow magazine or whatever horse people read. And so that's how we're using it today, primarily for this model I talked about, but the other, some of the other big things that come out of it are using this customer data. And I might as well keep going. Josh mentioned for this model, the data had to be aggregated, because we had to know down at what's the optimal granular level to look at this data at, to know where we should put something. And as it turned out, it was at the census tract level. In our case, that's what the data revealed. And so we can roll all that up to zip code and higher. But then we said, but we can't with aggregated data, we can't do as much as we want with this, bigger foray into customer-centric marketing. So Tricision built a second model, again, working with Weiland, which is right down to the customer level. And basically with that one, we can say, if we wanted to, I could produce a list that said, this is our very best customer, all the way down to our worst customer. And with that kind of data, we can do customer profiling, we can do segmentation, we can use it for personalization, and any number of other things. And so that's where, after the first effort was done, that's what we're branching into more, is using this data that's at the customer, right down to the customer level, to, try and take advantage of this great information.
So it sounds like, and this is where we kind of started this conversation, that you've established now this really positive culture of utilizing this data, understanding it, and getting it highly adopted across at least not all the areas that you want, but a significant number.
Yeah.
But this is not where you started. There was definitely a beginning of this journey. Can you talk a bit about that? Of, how did you get this idea sold in above you, right, to get this funded?
Well, again, it would have been much harder if we weren't actually replacing something. Business had seen a need prior to this to utilize customer data, but again, with this outside service, we didn't even have our own access to that data. It was our data, but the outside company had thought they had improved it to the degree that now it was theirs. And I was, having been involved in this kind of thing prior life, I was shocked to find out that now our data was their data, and we couldn't even get access to it. And that's actually the key thing with the head of sales and marketing, that says, I want to be able to start using that data. And, and that was the big thing. And then it helped that it wasn't really being used that well, and people were questioning the integrity of the data and all that. So in that sense, it was kind of an easy sell, but there are people who gave birth to this project, were still kind of in love with it. They did have kind of a hard time letting go. And so
Sure.
probably the tipping point was when we said, look, we think we can do this for about 1/6 of the cost, which we did. And so that's how we really sold it in initially.
Hey, Josh, same question to you. When you're looking at and working with some of your clients and organizations, what is some of the key things you need to do to get buy-in, to get them started? Is it one project? Is it a couple projects?
Yeah, that's one thing too that I always think is kind of overlooked when you're embarking on one of these analytic projects is, right, you've got your data needs and you've got, your fancy algorithms that you kind of put together, but then there's this buy-in that you have to get. So you can have the most amazing solution in the world, but if no one's going to buy in and no one's going to use it, then that's a problem. And so there's kind of that culture shift or that adoption that you have to get taken care of. You have to get that buy-in. And so in this case, like as Tom kind of outlines what happened at Steel, it really was a big win. And that was something that we kind of identified early on is when Tom had come to Scott was, hey, we want to work together and this is the project that we have. And he had mentioned that maybe this isn't what we do every single day, but it was, hey, we need a big win and we need to get people behind this and believing in it. And so that was definitely a mountain to overcome, considering that there was some distrust in the previous solution, and there wasn't that transparency and that back and forth on here's what's in there and here's how the data is used. So that ends up being just such a huge deal to get that. And another thing that Tom had mentioned too is that there was arguing over the actual data itself. And that's one thing that I always love to point out is like we should be spending our time arguing about what to do with the data and not about the data itself. And so, I mean, I think that speaks volumes to the data that Wyland provides is that we can go out, we can trust this data. We know what it is. You guys communicate back to us what it means. And there was a lot of back and forth on how can we use it to accomplish what we want. And again, I'm going to reiterate just how cool it was for this project that we were able to, again, aggregate and transform this data that Tricision has been used to working with for years and years and years. And Tom in his past life, same data, just a new use of it. And that just really helped this particular project that we had that trust in the data, we had the trust in the technique, and then the adoption happened. The other thing when we talk about the big win is when Tom said, yeah, we share it with the territorial managers. The best feedback that you could possibly get is a few of those guys had said, hey, there's some stuff here that how could anyone have known that? Like there's definitely some things that we didn't think anything would uncover it, and this uncovered it. And it's like at that point, you've got some trust, you've got some buy-in, and then you can move on from there. And then one more thing I'll add to that too is when you get that big win, other people in the organization will see that and they'll hear about it and they'll want to come to you and they'll want to learn more. They want to be part of that, or they want to be part of the next one. And they want to be able to, also make these better decisions with data, with analytics, now that they've seen it, a success or two from it.
Right.
A couple comments. Well, all right.
Well, no, I was just going to comment in some of our subsequent meetings from that. We talked about how you're also empowering a lot of your outside agencies to look at how they're generating creative, how they're generating messaging, how they're coalescing around the end user now versus just the brand. So that's also been a big win.
Yeah, and just a couple comments on what Josh said. The data, being able to trust it. We also used our own registration data in this model. That was a key part of it. But it took us 8 months of probably a 12-month project to get the data cleaned up, get it deduped and validated. And that just reaffirming what Josh says, that's one of the nice things about the Wyland data. We didn't have to do anything with it. It was clean. We just started using it. Another thing is, and on the point of trusting it, like here's something that's happening with it today. We have a new strategic initiative to add more independent dealers than on average. So we have an initiative now, let's add at a higher rate. And when we actually got the numbers of how many people wanted and in what kind of areas, we were the next day able to give the list of all the potential areas you're looking at. And I think it was like 1,600. Here it is, rank ordered, one to the bottom on the best ones. And we didn't, one of our key business people says, hey, can't you guys give us from the market opportunity model, the best location? Yep, we sure can. Next day we had it. So that's, when you have the confidence in it, that's the kind of thing. They didn't question it. They didn't hesitate. It's like, okay, here it is. We know where we know.
And that's it. Making the decisions faster, right? Having access to that right away. We did. I know we're going to have a Q&A here in a little bit, but we did get one question just around the culture. Can you share some key learnings about the data culture? Are there some tips and advice on what to look for when implementing this concept at a company? And
yeah, that's a huge, I'll take it first. Josh has a lot to say there, but I'm sure, but because that's just a really key thing. And because where we're at, even though we had that big win, like Josh said earlier, we're a brand centric marketing company and we're very successful. We haven't, what we do is try and let people know who STIHL is and about our products. And, we have Timber Sports. We're trying to just build the brand. So customer centric marketing has been a very tiny slice of what we did through our history. In the last year or two, it's gaining momentum, but it's still, we are very brand centric there. So even with the win off this big project, we're still, I'd say we're still in second gear, maybe approaching third now with regard to really capitalizing on all this data. A bigger foray into e-commerce. We have some new people there that know the value of this and they're hungry to get it and start using it. We have agencies who are hungry to do more. But just even having a big win isn't enough. Even just talking about the virtues of it isn't enough. I've been fairly impatient with it because I've come from where people live and die by it. And now it's like, why aren't people just clamoring for it? And one day, Josh said to me, cool your jets, son. I didn't say it quite like that, but he said, look, this is our experience. He can speak to it, but usually, you take a little bit of it, you just take steps towards it. And then at some point, you hit a tipping point and now it just, you can't keep up with people's demand. So it feels to me like we may be starting to approach that tipping point, but that would be one thing I would say to the question on establishing this culture. Have a little bit of patience, understand your audience, where they're coming from. If people have never done this before, it's hard for them to say, oh yeah, let's go march down this customer-centric path if they haven't done it. And frankly, infusing people into the organization, we have done it, is really a thing that would make a big difference. If you have someone you're hiring in this area, find somebody who's already done it. And that's a big key, I think.
Yeah, so awareness is also a big key, that there's even these data elements available out there.
Yeah. I've showed our even list of 135 to the same people, I'm sure, multiple times. And on the third time, they said, oh, we have that data. And I said, yeah, we kind of showed you this a couple times before. So it takes, it's not like, I told my wife I loved her on the day we got married. What else should you want? You kind of need to do it more than once. And repeatedly.
Josh, did you have some thoughts?
Oh yeah, I've definitely got thoughts on this one. So like you mentioned, kind of the awareness aspect of it is the education piece of it is so important. And what I always kind of describe it as is kind of that realm of possibility. So just the fact that that type of data even exists, or those type of analytical procedures exist, or there's a way to solve the problem this way, is so huge. Just educating the organization on what's possible. it's also super important to educate them on what analytics is and is not, or data and analytics is and is not. And so for me, I always just kind of describe it as an analytics support team is just here to make your life easier, right? So we talk about making better decisions faster. That's what we're here for. We're not here to replace your job. We're not here to be an easy button. We're not here to perform magic. It's just to get you what you need to do a better job at what you're doing. And so another way I'll describe it too is that way you can take the focus off of some of these side things and focus on the main thing, right? We can help you by giving you either reports or analysis or model results or just data describing your customer so you can think about them every single day. And I think that part's just so crucial to analytics and data being successful in an organization, is everyone understanding, what it is, what it isn't, and how to use it. And then, like Tom said, it's kind of this snowball effect, is once people kind of get a taste of it and see how it's working, they'll want to be a part of it and they'll hop on board, especially when there's high visibility. And so that's kind of the last thing I'll say about how do you start to spread that culture within the organization. So you need to choose a project that you think you can get a big win on. You need to choose one that you think will have high visibility, and you need to choose one that maybe doesn't require the biggest investment. It doesn't need a multi-million-dollar project to get it done, and probably something that can happen in a reasonable amount of time. So it really does come down to just choosing a very good project to potentially get that big win out of the gate, just to prove the value of data and analytics and that it can actually work.
And real tangible, actionable, deliverable, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and here's a little story about that. Our relatively new CEO is a fan of analytics, and he's also pushing this more. But he shared with us a story from his former life where he went from, I think, third in the market to being the dominant market leader, and he was the CEO of a paint company. And he said the big part that transformed that was when he started using our data for category management. He had a friend in the grocery businesses, when it was new to, instead of putting all the, General Mills in one spot and Post cereal in another spot, it's like you put the cornflakes together and you put the shredded wheat or whatever together, and that's how it's marketed today. And so he said, you should really think about this for your business. And he did. But he said, when we just talked about it, people didn't get it. They didn't embrace it. He said, so he said one time he had this big meeting where we did it more like a skit, and he was this Swami, whatever, something. And said, now, if you will do this, he actually showed them how to do it and showed them results. He got people excited to actually try it. And he said that was the key to having it be transformed. And I don't think we've done a good job. I don't think I've done a good job with that. I've been talking about it, and I'll say to people, you can use this for personalization. And I'm, looking back on it, I'm not sure any of them even know what I meant by personalization and what that means, or in what context or whatever. So we're looking at how we can do that better, but actually just showing, one of our next things we're going to do is actually show an actual example of segmenting your customer and then taking it all the way to what you would do with it. Like, again, all the horse people, and take it all the way to Horse and Cow magazine or whatever. But actually just show it tangibly as opposed to just talking about it. So I think that's another key.
Well, one more point that I'd ask you to touch on before we move to the Q&A, and I would make a comment. We're going to move into that here in a few minutes, so please, if you have questions, put them in the chat. But you have one key initiative of moving more into the battery-powered, not away from gas, but into the battery-powered, and that's been given the current climate, that's a key initiative, and where you get into personalization and customization, how you look at these two segments of your buyer file.
Yeah.
talk a little bit about how you're going to be able to use the data for that.
Well, yeah, and well, one thing is that's part of what's driving more demand for customer segmentation, because with battery products, a lot more battery products are sold online to a much higher degree than gasoline products.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to get better at and are working on it on that channel, because again, in our history is through independent dealers. But again, a lot of people are buying the less expensive battery products. They'll just go online and buy it. And so that argues, well, then if you want to be effective online, this is one way to do it, is to, target your customer better, to personalize the offering to them. Somebody comes to your website, and if they've already bought a trimmer, you don't want to face a trimmer. Let's face the next. And, we use this data to help find out what's the next thing they buy. After people buy a trimmer, what's the next thing they typically buy? And let's face that. That's a good example of personalization. Walking my talk of giving an example. Yeah, so that's one thing. But yeah, the ability to differentiate between our customers who are more gas centric and more battery centric is just the ability to know which ones have a bigger propensity to go one way or the other is a big thing.
And I would assume and I know that they look very, very different, just in all their propensities and demographics and things like that.
Yeah, right.
Great. Okay, we're at the half hour. I'm going to see if we open it up to any questions. Any questions? We've got one. Both Josh and yourself, Tom, have used data in former positions. Can you share any broader experiences with that? I guess, Tom, I'll kick that to you. From past lives.
Yeah, the big one, like I said, when I first, probably 25 years ago was my first foray into direct to consumer. And then I was with about 3 or 4 companies after that were predominantly direct to consumer. And the first two, when I got there, they were like, one of them was 100% catalog. That's when I first met Scott. And then the next one, we were 75% catalog, 25% online. And we shifted that while we were there. But again, it was, my eyes were just opened in the catalog only company at just how critical this data was, because you think about it, if you're going to mail a catalog, and less used, maybe even less effective today. I don't know, maybe catalogs are still very effective. Josh and Scott could answer that. But back then you drove a lot of business. This one was approaching $1 billion business just off of, when it was on catalog only, it was probably more like $500 million. But you're sitting there, look, I have a catalog that costs me $1 to $2 to make and send. I can't just target everybody with that. I have to know who, if I spend $2 to acquire customers, send this, what am I going to get back? And that's what guys like, one of the things Josh and Scott, guys like that do is say, if you mail to this customer, you will get $1, $1.25 back from that. Catalog's $1, yes, send a catalog. If you want to grow your customer base a bit, maybe you'll say, anybody we get 95 cents for, we'll send them that catalog. So that's just a really concrete way among many of how using this data. But like I said, in that era, these people lived and died by that kind of information.
Josh?
Yeah, so I'll give an example from just my past life at a very large outdoor sporting goods retailer.
That shall remain unnamed.
Yeah. And definitely in the multi-billion dollars. And so when I got there, very sophisticated analytics team, very data rich on the customer side. but across the organization, as my former boss would say, that we were data rich, kind of insight poor across the organization. So how do we spread
Interesting.
that? How do we spread that culture across the organization? And so I would say our merchandising team, they were kind of king of the organization. They were really the ones that just drove everything. And so a quick example there would be that they would go out and buy, say, 5,000 product A, then they would come to the marketing department and say, all right, go find who to sell this to. And so it's very kind of gut based, not based off of data and analytics and making those decisions. And then we saw this amazing transformation over a few years of where we started putting the customer at the center of everything, and this huge education process to describe to them who their customer actually is and what type of product you should be buying and designing for them, because that's who's coming to us. And one of the things that I'll quote Patrick Madden here, he owes me $20 for mentioning his name.
Nice name drop. Yeah.
Yeah, is that there's this whole thing about who we think the customer is. So right, like every organization has that.
Yes.
And then when you bring data in, you start to understand who your customer really is. And then in every organization I've ever been a part of, it's always who we want our customer to be. So there's kind of those three steps. And when you get data and analytics involved, you can start to clearly see those, and you can start to shift your thought process on, oh, here's the reality of the situation. Here's where we're really at.
Yeah.
And then here's where we want to go. And just saw a huge success there in understanding our customer base. And I think Tom had mentioned earlier, just getting like profiles out or personas, or just even descriptive statistics about who your customer is. I know a hot one's always, how old is our customer? How is that changing? Are they getting older? We want younger ones. And so, right, data is going to show you that. And you can see all that. And you can see as you make these strategic decisions to go left or right, you can go take a look at the data and see how you're doing, and if you're getting the desired effect that you want.
Yeah. And I think one of the key points that you made there is building out these personas around who you now know who your customers are, right? So that you're going to be able to segment on them and really fill out who these personas are, who are your best buyers, your worst buyers, your early adopters, your gas, your battery. And then once you round out these personas, you can drill that information down out to the dealers so that they know these people when they come in. You know, they know, and they're going to be able to personalize their messaging, the sell cycles of the promotions, and that's really important to have.
You know,
all right,
a word on personas, and I think you or even said this once. We have personas that were built out of our parent company, but they're built from surveys and focus groups. And
right.
you look at them, I'm kind of like, oh, I don't know if that resonates. Where did this come from? And I don't remember how many, but it could have been 30 people on a survey or something.
Right.
You know, but the point is, when you have this kind of data, you can build personas ground up with actual, this is what people are buying. Like the data we get from you comes from sources that are indicative of what people are actually spending their money on, not what they say when they're sitting in front of someone administering a survey, or they're sitting in a focus group and groupthink kicks in. It's the actual data builds the persona, way more effective and rich than the top down.
Right. And once you establish those personas, you can apply those persona scores to the entire database. Everybody gets put into a persona, and it's far more actionable to market to those personas once you've made those data decisions, versus trying to take the anecdotal data and put it into your database.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll say that qualitative data is very, very important. And I mean, I definitely believe in it, but there's definitely a difference between how a consumer, kind of votes with their mouth versus how they vote with their dollar. They're both very important data sources, but I'll give a little more weight to one over the other.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. Both are very important.
I've watched focus groups, and so it's as Josh has.
And myself, for my agency background, administered a few focus groups myself. So I'm much more in the data business now. All right, so it looks like we've got no further questions right now, so we can move to the final wrap up here. And as we wrap up, we've added a link to a download in the chat, or we soon will. There it is. It includes a case study on the work Weiland did with Steel, as well as some additional information on our data products. Tom, I'd ask you, what final advice do you have for our participants who are looking to bring data into their organizations?
Well, let's see. One thing comes to mind right away, because it's one thing to have the data, but then you have to have the capability to do something with it. And I view us as being fortunate that I early in my career came across Tricision, because they are really good at what they do. For 25 years, there's some really big companies that have tried to beat their models and don't. I mean, I know one really big company says we won't even compete with them anymore because we've never been able to beat their model. And I remember once a group from MIT came into one of these fire companies and said, we guarantee you, because we're really smart people, we're from MIT, we will create a better model than what you're getting today. And the Tricision model wiped the floor with them. So that's one element. But right here in River City, I have just an exceptional analytics team. And, the tools today are becoming so powerful. I tell our guys all the time, that is just cheating, that you can run 100 regressions at once and it'll tell you which one the best is, as opposed to running one at a time in the old fashioned way. So the tools are a big thing, but you really, people who really understand data science and love it, and data engineering are just worth their weight in gold. And we're just really fortunate to have a really crack team here. So that's one thing, build a really solid analytics team. The culture thing is the big one. I guess it's, I'm still learning every day. How do I need to have the conversations in a way that people can hear it and will resonate with it? But I'll just repeat, it's one thing to talk about it, and we're kind of shifting our behavior here more to show than talk. How can we actually illustrate in a more tangible way? Here's something you can do with this data, whether it's build a persona or do a segment and carry it all the way through the life cycle of how that data will be used. You can use this to, go place it by certain AdWords, or go place it in a particular media to drive sales or whatever. So that's kind of the stage we're at. So show more than tell. And yeah, you just have to, and be a little patient if you're not already in a world where it's highly valued. If things don't change overnight, you just have to kind of stay at it in terms of shifting the culture and having a bit of a transformation.
Good advice. Good advice. Before we turn it over to Josh for his final, I do have to give a good plug for Tricision and Josh and Scott as well. Josh and I have been working together for, I think, upwards 15 plus years, maybe longer now.
Years. Yeah, longer.
Yeah, plus. We don't need to go into the plus. It's fine. So we're a long time. And I agree, the team over at Tricision and Josh has been solid partners, and just a definite asset. And they bring the analytics, we bring the data, and together we absolutely make a product better than the sum of our parts. And I think that is definitely what you look for in partners, right? That push and break good thinking. So we appreciate that. Your final thoughts there, Josh, as we're wrapping this up?
Yeah. So first off, I want to thank you for having me on to talk about a topic that I'm so passionate about. And right, we talk about data, we talk about analytics, and right, Weiland's got amazing data. We have amazing analytics. I wish I knew the stat off the top of my head about how many kind of data science projects fail. And I think the reason why they fail is because of this culture piece that we're talking about. So when Tom mentioned, oh yeah, the MIT guys came in and they said they would mop the floor with you guys, is one of the quotes I always have is, I'm not here to make models or algorithms that NASA or MIT would be proud of. We're just here to make ones that'll make an organization money. And so to do that, if you kind of, maybe you do have a subpar algorithm or a subpar technique that you use, but if you have the right buy-in and people understand what the output is and how they can use it to make those better decisions, then you're going to have success. And so that's the one thing that I would say, do not overlook how important the culture actually is, especially as Tom mentioned. There's so many tools that are just readily available to people now that are just plug and play. You just give it your data and it outputs a result and you just go, well, yeah, that might work sometimes, but a little scary, right? And so just promoting, again, that culture of data and analytics and that education is so important. And I think it's going to lead to many more successful projects. So again, just because you can do some of these things in these plug and play type environments doesn't mean that that's always the best course. And you talked about the partnership between, Tricision and Wyland that we have. Is both organizations really do value that culture and just that education of how it works and making sure that everyone's educated and comfortable with what we're doing. And I think that's why we see a lot more success.
Hey, Jeff, I just had another thought on this, Josh, and me think of it is people I've noticed who aren't really that excited in or interested in analytics. I've come to observe that a lot of it is because their experience with analytics is mostly just historical reporting.
Yeah,
that's the really great thing about, our first project was an action oriented. It's helping somebody make actually a decision on something they have to do. And, even a lot of what we have here, the historical reporting, some of you have to know, but when people look at, okay, how much time they spend doing this, because they don't do anything with it. And Josh preaches this to us all the time about, we don't like working on anything that isn't actionable or action oriented. Anyone can do historical reports. Have what your focus, your capabilities here, your time, talent, and energy on things that are actionable. And I think that's another thing that helps in this culture thing, to have people embrace it, is when they actually see utility out of what you're giving them.
Right. Absolutely. What are you solving for? What are the insights, making the insights actionable? Absolutely. Yeah. Great conversation. All right. Well, I'd like to thank Tom and Josh for sharing their thoughts and experience. Great conversation today. Really, really appreciate it. I hope our discussion has been able to address, given our attendees a lot of new ways to think about data that impacts their organizations. Again, guys, like I said, I've known Josh for a long time. I've known Tom now for a long time as well. I really, really appreciate your guys' time today. I hope it did give our attendees a lot to think about. Certainly a great conversation. So as we wrap up here, for those of you watching, you can learn a lot more about Wyland and how we serve brands and agencies by clicking on the link. I feel like I should say click on the link and follow, but I'm not going to do that. But by clicking on the link that just appeared in your chat box or visiting us at wyland.com. As registered attendees, you'll be notified by email when the webinar is available online for viewing again or to share with your colleagues. If you asked a question in the chat that we weren't able to get to, one of our presenters or a Wyland team member will respond to you directly by email. And if this conversation prompted ideas or questions for you, please visit wyland.com or email us at info@wyland.com, and we'll be happy to provide more resources or answer your questions. Again, we do have a short survey that you'll be directed to as soon as you exit the webinar. We appreciate your feedback as long as it's positive. On today's event. And again, thank you all for being here today. We hope that the information we've shared will be valuable as you consider how data can help your organization make better decisions faster. Thank you. Guys, thanks again, everybody. I appreciate your time today.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.